Colorado versus Georgia Tech is going to be a Friday night game to help us kick off 2025. I want to talk about why I think this is low-key an outstanding matchup, and they were right, the Big 12 being them, to move this game to Friday night. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year-round, and we got some news, right? The Big 12 announced its 10 Friday games, and on the menu, you got two Colorado games. Colorado at Houston and Colorado versus Georgia Tech, and even gonna get my alma mater, Tulsa, its ass kicked by Oklahoma because we wasn't no good last year. I'm not even sure we're gonna be that good this year. And, frankly, they got four guys that play quarterback at Oklahoma State that I think are pretty good, Hoss Haney being one of them, but we'll see, right? We'll save that for some other time. I think that this is a really cool game, Colorado and Georgia Tech. One, both these teams could low-key be very good. And we know that Colorado is going to draw some eyeballs, right? That's one of the reasons you want to put this game here. It's one of the reasons that we are so excited about this game being played in August, right, to open. First, it's Caden Salter, Julian Lewis. We think it's going to be Caden Salter. We're going to see the first team that Deion Sanders has coached without his sons playing on it. It's also going to be the first time that he's had a quarterback not named Shedeur Sanders since Jalen Jackson over at Jackson State during that spring year. I'm thinking to myself, look, man, I don't know that I want this game if I'm Colorado. I'm not sure I want this game if I'm Georgia Tech. That's how much this game would give me the willies if I was on either side. Georgia Tech, you've got a guy in Haynes King that can spin it, right? He ran off Zach Pyron, who's going to be fighting for the job in Minnesota right now. You also know they got a couple of tailbacks that can also go. Jamal Haynes being one of those. They lost a couple of guys to the portal like they're wont to do, but when they lose guys to the portal, they're usually hitters, which means that they've been pretty good at bringing up their own. And Brent Pry is, we're talking about one of the really unsung heroes, I think, in the coaching ranks. What he was able to do at Georgia Tech the last 2 years, put it this way, they've been able to put together winning seasons back-to-back years the first time in a decade. You got to go back to Paul Johnson when they were running triple option the last time you could say that Georgia Tech was anywhere near a good football team. And they knocked off not just Florida State, but Miami too. And they took Georgia into the deep water. Damn near drowned them. 8 overtimes it took Georgia to beat Georgia Tech in Athens to end the season. And Georgia still ended up winning the SEC championship. Georgia still ended up being one of the teams that we're watching deep into the college football playoff. Now, I think another reason that this is interesting is this is the 35th anniversary of them splitting their national championship. Yes, Georgia Tech and Colorado have each won a national championship or a share of one. And that's really cool to think about because it reminds me that it's not out of the question for teams like Georgia Tech or Colorado to perhaps ascend and become one of those teams that not just makes the playoff like, say, Indiana, but can win the whole damn thing if things break right for them. Now, you also are going to get, I think, the full dose on this. I don't expect either quarterback to be very polished by the time we get into this, even though both of those guys are going to be seasoned starters, but they both got the same skill set. They're both ridiculous in the open field. They're both Texas high school quarterbacks. People forget this. Haynes King coming out of Longview, first starting out at A&M. And they're going to have guys that are open downfield. Whether or not Draylon Miller, I think, figures into this is going to be a very big deal, and how good the run game is for Colorado is going to be a really huge deal because the thing that we know that Georgia Tech wants to do is run the football and play keep away. This is how they were able to upset what was then the number 10 team in the country, Florida State, and they've got a history of doing this sort of thing, right? Now, Florida State wasn't anywhere near as good as any of us thought they were going to be. As a matter of fact, it's probably the worst season that Florida State has ever had, all things considered. But I think we're also kind of sleeping on what that Georgia Tech offensive line was able to be hitting on last year. This was a team that I think really had the identity of its head coach and really was understood by Buster Faulkner, their offensive coordinator. It was fun. I think that Pat Shermer's going to have his hands full with a defensive line that can get after his quarterback. More than that, I'm going to be curious to see what Robert Livingston can do against Haynes King without Nakai Hill-Green playing linebacker for them. I think you're going to have a lot over there that you got to make up for. Never mind, there's not going to be any Travis Hunter on either side of the ball, and people are going to be going after you. If they can beat you deep downfield, they will. That would be my knock against Colorado going into this if there was one. I know that Georgia Tech can play with the best teams in all of college football because they did that against Miami. They did that against Georgia. And at the time, they did that against Florida State. For Colorado, the knock on them now is, hey, can you win the games that we expect you to win, and can you upset a couple of teams that we don't? For instance, they were not able to get past Kansas State last year. They got run through by a Kansas team that was surging on the back end, and they couldn't get past BYU, right? That's part of it. But they beat everybody else that we thought that they should, and that's important, right? Nebraska being perhaps that only program in there that kind of jumped up and bit them. They got a pick six that really put this game out of reach for Colorado. But if you are trying to lay down a marker in the Big 12 and you are trying to return to being one of the top teams in the league, this is a great way to start, right? I don't think the winner of this game is going to end up ranked if they don't enter the thing ranked already. That's going to be huge, right? It's going to be a game that is going to really put you behind the 8-ball, or you're just going to feel good about relief of being 1-0 after that. If this was a game, say Colorado was playing Georgia and not Georgia Tech, we might think about it differently, right? If this was a game where Georgia Tech was playing, let's say, Arizona State and not Colorado, we might be thinking about it differently. But I think it's a great game for the Big 12 to open up with. I think the Friday games are actually a really good idea given what the calendar for college football has become and how it is needing to work around the NFL. So Friday night games have become the bread and butter of Fox and ESPN because they work, right? Especially knowing that you're going to see more of the professional wrestling over on Netflix and on Peacock and so forth, so on. None of that's really on broadcast anymore. You needed a great Friday product, something that could get you there on 7 o'clock and perhaps 10 o'clock with the doubleheaders late in the season. That's going to be fun. Big 12 has an opportunity to get ahead here. And if they are as good as they were last year, because it was deep last year, and that worked to its benefit, right? All 16 teams, for the most part, could play. Everybody had something to give, and that's how you end up with an Arizona State team that was picked dead last in the league that ends up winning the league. That's great for them. In the ACC, you've got an idea here that you could beat SMU if you're Georgia Tech, right? That's how SMU got into the playoff. They were able to win games like this one. People forget that. When they played against BYU, nobody really thought about that game. And then at the end, we're talking about a team that played really great football at the end, just missed out on playing for the Big 12 championship. And another one that did play for the ACC title against Clemson and did make the college football playoff. Georgia Tech, you're thinking you could be one of those programs, things break right with for you. And if Colorado ends up being as good as they were last year, winning 9 games, that's going to look really good for you for the college football playoff selection committee when it comes time to do this. I'm very excited about this game. I really am. I think it's a great spot for both of these programs. I think it's a great opportunity for them to stick out. And Georgia Tech has done the most up front in this spot. So it's Colorado. Texas Christian a couple years ago. North Dakota State last year. And now, yeah, they're going to get the Georgia Tech the Yellow Jackets that last time they saw Georgia damn near took their lid off. I'm so excited about this one. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. Let me know who you think is going to win this game, Georgia Tech or Colorado, and should Colorado be afraid of Georgia Tech? Should Georgia Tech be afraid of Colorado?